man, he's doing it right out in the open.
I reckon he probably hasn't had much sleep over the past week.
No.
Could you imagine?
No, he's under a lot of pressure right now, and I understand that. You know, we all know how we all get when there's a lot of heat being applied to us, and he's trying to get this deal done between Iran and Israel, and it's kind of wearing on him a little bit. It certainly looks like it.
Intense anger today on camera as that ceasefire that he brokered between Israel and Iran appeared to grow more fragile. He conveyed that he was unhappy in particular with Israel, who he said quickly violated the truce. Trump then held a firm and direct call with his Israeli counterpart Benjamin Netanyahu this morning, according to a White House source. Just a few other things to get us right up to date. Israel struck a radar site north of Tehran hours after the ceasefire was due to take effect, following accusations that Iran had fired several missiles at Israel. That's according to the Prime Minister's office. Israel refrained from conducting further strikes after Netanyahu spoke to Trump. Meanwhile, the US president's decision to launch airstrikes against Iran during the weekend is broadly unpopular with Americans. According to a new CNN poll, we'll dissect the events of the past 7 days then as we go. Just before that, in the United States, well, it's a bit like Spain. Worse, in fact, in some places.
A little toasty.
Hey, tens of millions, sweltering heat wave blanketing the central and eastern U.S. It was on the forecast, wasn't it? What are those heat domes?
Yeah, one of those heat domes going in. It's like over 100 million people are being affected. And something I said before we came on the air is all of them are in cities I've lived in. You know, Chicago, Kansas City, St. Louis, Detroit. Lived in all of them, and extreme heat. Back in New York with a heat index, which includes humidity in New Jersey, 118 degrees, which is probably around 43, 44 degrees centigrade. Just nuts. And so I would just, say everybody hydrate and make sure, and that goes for people here. I mean, you don't need me to tell you that you should be drinking as much water as you possibly can. And
what's interesting is that quite often we hear about, climate change. It never used to be like this. But you've just said that having lived in these areas throughout your career, it was always similar.
Always very similar. It gets very hot. And I lived down south for a long time. I lived in Richmond, Virginia. I lived in New Orleans, and it gets very, very hot in those cities and very humid. And you just want to crawl into a cocoon and just die for about 3 months.
I remember getting off the plane in Miami and going, whoa.
Yeah.
It just hits you.
Yeah. That's very true. So they're in the meat grinder right now, and hopefully they'll come out of it in about 8 weeks. Mm-hmm. But I don't think anything as bad as I was in Las Vegas one time at an outdoor pool party, and it was 114 degrees. And there's no humidity in Vegas or even in a place like Phoenix, and so you don't feel it quite as much. But it's still awfully ridiculously hot. So,
okay,
just needed to mention that.
Indeed, yep. Right. So Trump was talking earlier before the little exchange of fire that we spoke about, and said that Israel and Iran had negotiated a complete ceasefire with his help. He was calling it a 12-day war, saying that that's it. It won't happen again. Yeah, it's a little bit fragile, though, isn't it? Come on, that area is known for these breaking the ceasefires on a regular basis.
Well, they called the ceasefire, and then right before the ceasefire was to start at 5 a.m. local time, Israel shot off a whole batch of missiles toward Iran, and then after the ceasefire has taken effect, Iran countered with some more strikes, and it just went on and on during the morning. And that's what made Trump so furious, is that they didn't seem to understand or want to honor the fact that this is a ceasefire. And he kind of went off and dropped the F-bomb a few times before he got on the plane.
I mean, if that's what it was like talking to reporters just before he got on the helicopter or the plane or whatever it was, can you imagine that conversation between him and Benjamin Netanyahu?
Oh, my God. Oh, my God. He's pretty much, from everything we've read, pretty much had it up to here with Bibi. And as much as he supports Israel, these guys, I don't, when he says, I don't know what they're, if they know what they're doing, I don't think he's wrong. I think these countries have been at it for so many years, you kind of lose sight of the fact of what am I doing? Why am I here? What do I need to accomplish? What is going to happen here the next day? And so I understand his frustration. He's a guy that, he shoots from the lip, and says the very first thing that comes out of his mouth. But I don't think he's entirely incorrect in what he's saying now.
But of course, I mean, things are moving so fast and changing so quickly. This is another situation on top of where we already were with the latest headline about the ceasefire. Then it wasn't. Now it is again. I mean, and even, just 12 hours before that, we were talking about Iran launching missiles at a U.S. base in Qatar.
Mm-hmm. And that seems to have been forgotten.
Unprecedented, effectively.
Of course. And
it's a huge airbase. I mean, I've been there. That's a massive base.
Yeah. But apparently there was very little destruction. There was no loss of life. And I don't know whether it was because Iran alerted the U.S. that it was coming.
Donald Trump certainly said that in his this morning, didn't he, in his social media, where he said that there was prior knowledge, and basically was to save face so that Iran were responding, but without escalating.
Yeah, that's right.
So the Qataris were really not very happy about the fact that they've been attacked at all. I mean, there's been anger, so much anger on both sides. You imagine how upset the Iranians were
because
having been subjected to the bombing by not just Israel, but of course prior to that from the US at the weekend.
Because at the end of the day, it is the bombings did occur in their country. Everybody thinks about, it's a U.S. base. It's still in Qatar. And so there is that. The big question seems to be about regime change now.
That was just came out again, like you said, shooting from the lip. I mean, Vance and Hegseth were saying that wasn't the plan. Yeah. And then, we're doing this in reverse order, I know. But, it just shows you how much changes in the big statements that are made in a very short space of time in the Trump era.
Yeah, Hegseth and Vance said, our goal is not to have a regime change in Iran. And what happens was Trump came out 5 minutes later and said, it is possible that we could have a regime change because, it's, we need to make Iran great again. I don't know why he would say that.
I think this was on his Truth Social. It's not politically correct to use the term regime change, I'm quoting. Yeah. But if the current Iranian regime is unable to make Iran great again, why wouldn't there be a regime change? MIGA, M-I-G-A, make Iran great again.
Yeah. Well, on top of that, you've got J.D. Vance going out there saying that a regime change would be the stupidest thing in the world and be met with overwhelming force. And so I don't know what's going to happen because the latest quote I saw from Trump said, now we are not looking at a regime change over there. So I don't know where the truth lies and that sort of thing. I think
the truth lies with the last thing that he said or the last person that he spoke to. Generally,
it's insane.
That's why it's so difficult to unpick all the time, because so many things happen in such a quick space of time. Now he has spoken to the MAGA faithful, but generally they're not very happy, right?
No.
About bombing Iran.
No, they seem to be split right down the middle. There are a lot of people who say because the Republican Party in the past has been pre-Trump has always been in favor of war and America asserting itself overseas and American greatness and that sort of thing. But there are a lot of them who are pointing at Trump saying, remember, you said you were going to keep us out of war, you were going to keep us in peace, and this is in complete violation of what you yourself said. So people like Marjorie Taylor Greene, who is very vocal and a big Trump supporter and would do anything for him. Now she's coming out against him. There are a lot of people. God knows the Democrats are in favor of pulling back, and they're not happy with this overextension of presidential power without any approval of Congress, because he just kind of went ahead and did it. And another thing too is that he has said that he was absolutely going to do this without telling any Democrats. There were a handful of Republicans in the Senate that he told about this, but the Democrats as a party were kept completely in the dark. And I to use a phrase, that's not cool. They're all part of the government as well. I don't care if they're on the other side of the fence. I mean, clearly.
I understand it from the secrecy point of view, but there are guidelines and there are precedents and there are ways to do this within the administration.
Well, when Obama went after Osama bin Laden, which they had been pursuing him for years, there were only a handful of people that knew he was going to do this. years ago. So yeah, I'm all in favor of secrecy. We don't want everybody knowing what's going on, but to completely lay out.
I think by the end of last week, it pretty much looked like it was going to happen, and it usually would be Saturday into Sunday or Friday into Saturday. It looked pretty much on the cards. To be honest.
Well, remember he did say that something might happen within 2 weeks.
Well, that was it.
That was his rope. That was
give him 2 weeks.
Yeah, that was his rope-a-dope. He knew he was going to do something quickly, and
he said he wasn't going to do anything for 2 weeks, and then did.
But there certainly are a lot of people in the Senate and a lot of Americans who are very, very unhappy.
I was going to come to that, actually, yes, because it isn't just the politicians on both sides of the House. Americans do disapprove, and what have they been saying about the current situation?
Well, 56% of Americans, this is a CNN poll that was taken this weekend, so this is all kind of fresh information, 56 to 44, according to the survey, strongly disapprove, outpacing the share who strongly approve. Most of them distrust Trump's decision-making on the use of force in Iran. 6 in 10 are worried that the strikes will increase the Iranian threat to the U.S. I mean, maybe in the terms of sleeper cells there are Iranians and people who are Muslim and sympathetic to Iranians all over the U.S. and all over a lot of countries. And so there are very sharp partisan divides throughout every question that's asked and this sort of thing. So everybody's got a very sharp opinion, it seems, and most of them against what the president is doing. And I think a lot of it has to do with the secrecy and not wanting to get into another war. You have to remember, and you know better than anybody, this is a country that's been at war for 200 years. I mean, off and on.
Well, the only things that were being shot at us in Iraq were things that were made or supplied by Iran. So
that's
everything had Farsi on it. So
very true. But I think there are a lot of Americans, and according to this poll, 58% of Americans say that these strikes are going to make Iran more of a threat to the U.S. And I think that's what people are concerned about is all of a sudden things in the U.S. starting to blow up. And people living their lives in fear. And
of course, all of this came out prior to what's been said by President Trump in the last sort of 6 to 8 hours, where he's, it's one and done in so far as talking about the airstrikes by the B-2 bombers on the nuclear facilities. Obviously, he is hoping that that's it, done and finished and over with. But remains to be seen. Whether that'll be the case.
Really did. I think he really did think he could just walk away from it, that he could go and send the bombers over. And the way they did it was really quite clever, sending the decoy bombers flying west, because he had told people he was going to do that. I mean, I remember the night before reading, I'm sending bombers just to protect our interests, and I'm sending them over the Pacific. And I thought, well, that's not the way I would fly, and it turns out that he had a plan and everything. The bombers were flying to the east. It was, for what he was trying to do was really quite clever.
Quite a bit made of it in Britain, where they didn't use Diego Garcia, so Britain wasn't asked about the situation, about whether they could use that airbase. The fact that they flew straight out of Missouri and refueled in the air, and then back again.
Anyhow, but you're right. You said one and done, and I think that's the best way to put it, because I think that what he wanted to do was go over, bomb those 3 bases, and then refuel, and then head back and just go, all right, we're done here.
We did talk about this last Tuesday that they were the only possibility for something to perhaps get as deep as they may need to get in those facilities. The B-2 bombers with those bunker busters, nobody else has got them. It's only the US. And so it turned out at the weekend that's what happened. What have other nations been saying? Generally, from what I've seen, they want to return to diplomacy, don't they?
Yeah, every nation that we've read about, from the UK to Russia to Iraq and Egypt and the neighbors that border Iran, they are hoping that this is all going to be subject to a diplomatic solution. Nobody wants any more bombs flying. There's no question about that. There's universal, I don't want to say condemnation, because everybody is always afraid of Trump. Everybody's afraid of what he's going to do and whether he's going to turn on a dime and all of a sudden be angry with any of our allies, but clearly everybody that we've read about, that we've seen quotes from,
generally asking for a return to diplomacy.
Yeah, let's go back. Let's go back to the table. Let's let cooler heads prevail, and let's just talk about this.
There's a number of other headlines to do with this, and the question about whether Donald Trump violated the Constitution by bombing Iran at the weekend.
Yeah, that's a big question about that, and the president's Office of Legal Counsel said, quote, "The president is clearly well within his Article 2 powers here," one former senior U.S. official told CNN. He said, end of story. That's not really the end of the story, because in most cases, even in the case of World War II, when Franklin Roosevelt, when the U.S. was bombed in Pearl Harbor, Franklin Roosevelt had to go through and he had to get the approval of Congress before he could declare war on Japan and Germany. So, yeah, it's not really a simple thing. So if this goes any farther, if this becomes even more of a conflict, you're going to need the support of Congress, and he's going to have a hard time getting it.
So initially, then, the general consensus is that within Article 2, he was okay.
He was okay. I mean, that's within his world. Within Congress, they're looking at it saying, no, it wasn't okay, but what are you going to do about it? There's nothing you can do. The bombs have already fallen, and he went ahead and extended his power into that particular position. But I contend that if it goes farther, if suddenly there is a conflict and boots are needed on the ground, which I don't think is going to happen. If that happens, you're going to need Congress to vote on all this.
But
you can't do it by a presidential.
Don't expect that to any boots on the ground.
No,
certainly.
I don't think so.
One part of this, Pakistan were saying that Donald Trump should be given the Nobel Peace Prize, but obviously that was before the bombing of Iran, and then subsequently condemned him for bombing Iran after backing him for the Nobel Peace Prize. It was like within a day, wasn't it?
Yeah, well, the reason they were putting him up for the Nobel Peace Prize is because they said he did a great deal of work on de-escalating any problems Pakistan had with India. And when the Indians were consulted about this, they said, No, he didn't do anything. I don't know where you're getting this information from. So Pakistan was clearly kissing up to Trump because everybody knows that he would like to have a Nobel Peace Prize pretty much more than anything in the world. And looks like, at least for Pakistan, that is not going to happen. But you're right. They are very close friends with the people in Iran. And when these bombs started, they took it off the table. They said, we reject the fact that he should be up for a Nobel Peace Prize. But the initial thing was about how he conducted himself between Pakistan and India.
Prince with Raspberry Beret. Shaggy here after the break. And our U.S. correspondent, Rich Reynolds.
Second-hand store.
This afternoon.
I'd like to see you in a Raspberry Beret.
50s,
I would love to see you in a beret, period.
Hey. Me and Prince had the same mustache back in the day because neither of us were shaving.
I had one. Oh, really? I had one for like 15 years. That was the thing, right?
Really? Yeah, no. I don't think, what he had and what I had, we weren't shaving. It was just the same thing. Bum fluff, as we call it in Britain. I don't know what you call it in the States.
No, that's pretty accurate. No, I've never heard that. Bum fluff?
Yeah.
Oh, for the love of God.
Hey, we were both still quite young. It was the 80s.
Bum fluff, indeed.
Right, returning to the subject in hand, House Democratic veterans are backing moves then to limit Trump's military authority, 12 members demanding congressional approval for war after, of course, what they are saying, Trump's unauthorized bombing of Iran, despite what we were saying before about some people saying that they thought it was all right.
Right. It's the fact that a lot of them are Republicans and a lot of them are Democrats, but certainly the more senior people are not very happy with the fact that he went over their heads and just decided to do this unilaterally. But including one of them is a guy named Tom Massey, who's a Kentucky Republican, and Ro Khanna, who's a California Democrat. They've been kind of championing this one bipartisan resolution to make it so Trump has got to get their approval before.
Are there enough of them to get this through?
I don't think so. That's just my opinion. There are 12 of them. There are 12 veteran House members, And these are all veterans. That point needs to be made.
Okay.
They're not just people who are elected. They are people like Gilbert Ray Cisneros, Eugene Simon Vinman, Chris DeLuzio, and there are a couple more who are veterans and very, very outspoken in this. So I don't think they've got much to stand on, but I think as veterans they have every right to stand up and say, hey, this is what we need to do, going forward. So for them not to say anything would have been kind of weird. So.
Okay. I'm just watching behind you, Trump arriving.
What's going on? What am I missing?
Trump's arriving for the NATO summit, but we've got plenty of other things to get through before we even start to get there.
He made good time.
Yeah, unless that was an old picture.
Where is the NATO summit being held? I should know this. But
I did know.
I did know. But if anybody knows out there, please let us know. We are monitoring CNN all the time to try to keep up on things. But boy, things are happening so fast that as soon as I get in the chair here,
it's in The Hague, isn't it? So,
The Hague?
yeah. But
right.
Anyway, I want to just don't want to get ahead of ourselves.
All right.
Try to stay with where we are. But as I said, so many different stories and so many different aspects to them. You mentioned sleeper cells just before. So for those who don't perhaps know what sleeper cells are, what are they, and why are the FBI on alert for them?
So sleeper cells, in a phrase, are spies or terrorists that are hiding out in the U.S. or in Western countries. They remain inactive. They live quiet, unassuming lives. If you think of the show The Americans, anybody, I was a big fan of the show when it was on, and it was about a couple that live in Virginia, and they lived during the Cold War, and they were Russian spies, but they went to Little League, and they had potluck dinners and that sort of thing, but they were Russian spies, and the guy
Didn't they let her out recently? I thought they'd let her out recently.
They may have, but this was fiction.
Yeah.
But the hook was the guy who lived across the way that became their best friend was an FBI agent. So that's what's happening here is the FBI and the CIA now have to really ramp things up to make sure that these sleeper cells that maybe they know about are continuing to be inactive and don't do any damage, like blowing up schools, blowing up hospitals, and that sort of thing. So that's
part of the community.
Yeah, they assimilate themselves into community, and in fairness, there are American sleeper cells and UK sleeper cells in other countries who have done the exact same thing. It's the nature of spy work. You used to be a spy, so you should know. Weren't you a spy? You weren't a spy?
No.
Not even in a Raspberry Beret. No wonder.
War DJ, that's all. Right. What else have we got going on? Right, let's go to more domestic matters and talk about the U.S. Supreme Court clearing the way for Trump to deport migrants to countries not their own, a subject which has also come up a lot, of course, in the UK and across Europe.
I think this is an outrageous story. Not surprising, just outrageous that what's happened here is the Supreme Court, which, as we all know, swings to the right, and there were only 3 liberal members on the court, but this time the 9-3, they said, no, it's okay if anybody who's a suspected terrorist or somebody who has a police record, it's okay if we send them to South Sudan, we send them to somewhere in Africa, we send them to South America, even though that is not their home country. I think that's, even if the person is given due process, I think that's a little bit too far, and these are not good places. These are places that are well known to have a lot of terrorists and not very good judicial systems, to put it mildly. So
is this likely to be challenged, I suppose?
Yeah, I guess. The Department of Homeland Security said that the decision is a victory for the safety and security of the American people, and it says DHS can now execute its lawful authority and remove illegal aliens to a country willing to accept them. So this is going back to where we were a couple of months ago. It's just grabbing people who are in the country illegally and just throwing them into vans and then sending them off to countries that a lot of times they don't even know where those
football and
countries
soccer games, dragging people out of
it's
stadiums.
The same thing. They've got to, if they play football and, sure. Why not take them out of there? So anyhow, this is what the complete blessing of the Supreme Court this week. So stay tuned on this because there are going to be a lot of legal challenges on this being brought. But for now, if anybody who is in the country illegally and is performing any sort of act that is seen as being unseemly, you're going to be shipped off to some country that you probably can't even spell.
Okay. Meanwhile, more on the domestic front, tariffs, and the question was posed, has anything actually got more expensive, or, sorry, in American, gotten more expensive than because of Trump's tariffs?
Well, a lot of people are not going to like the answer to this question, and that is that after tariffs, everybody thought, and most economists thought, that the prices would all rise and the economy would collapse. That hasn't happened. Actually, a lot of prices have gone down. The prices of automobiles have gone down. The price of gasoline, for the most part, have either been steady or have gone down, even with this
little spikes because of what's been going on in the Gulf.
But this thing where everybody thought that the sky was going to fall, it hasn't. However, consumer prices rose just 2.4% annually last month, according to the Bureau of Labor Statistics.
Well, that takes in a lot of stuff, though.
That takes a lot of stuff in. So you could...
Because it's annually, so...
Yeah, but you could cherry pick this and say, well, the cost of X went up or the cost of Y went up. But overall, the economy has not taken a huge hit. The people are holding their own. That being said, most economists that I've read have said, just wait, because it's going to happen. Because what's happened here is that the shelves are still filled with the non-tariff goods, and once the tariff goods that are a lot more expensive are going to be those prices are jacked up, you're going to have you potentially could have not a very Merry Christmas.
All right, so America's effective tariff rate is now 14.1%, according to Fitch. That's up from 2.3% last year. So Trump raised taxes on imported goods by nearly 12% this year. So, yeah, that's going to translate itself to the, as you say, to the supermarkets, to the shelves.
Yeah, and even cars, the cost of automobiles has fallen for now. Now they're going to go up probably because a lot of the parts are come from overseas. But we'll see what happens. But every economist that we're reading...
It's not stopped Trump and his supporters from trumpeting the fact that things have not gone up.
I know. Oh, God, they made him. And Peter Navarro, who is kind of a snake oil salesman.
Well, he's a snake oil salesman. He's the White House's top trade advisor.
I know.
You're calling him a snake oil salesman.
Well, he is. And I've been following this guy for a number of years, but he is pointing to the low overall inflation rate during Trump's first term, despite the tariffs, and he's correct. The CPI peaked at 2.9% in 2018 and fell below 2% during most of 2019. But as we said, the economists are saying, just wait, because something's going to happen. Think about the fact that Walmart, Target, Lululemon, Home Depot, Costco, these are the big box stores in some of the big box stores in the U.S., they said they're going to be raising prices because of tariff pressures. And as I've said in numerous weeks, just wait and see what happens at Christmas because, I don't know how many people are buying things. You're not buying presents and stuff. You're not spending an inordinate amount of money during the summer. But when it hits the fan in right around the time of Thanksgiving, around late November, that's when things possibly could change. And fingers crossed, I hope it doesn't.
Well, let's hope we're quoting Peter Navarro again, saying that things are still good. On the way, the Texas governor signing a bill requiring the 10 Commandments to be displayed in classrooms, along with cannabis use linked to a double risk of heart disease death, according to a new study. And, Oklahoma City Thunder. Talking about all of those shortly with Big Rich Reynolds, our U.S. correspondent. Double A-sided single, that actually, with In the Summertime, which was our superstar
what are you playing?
Earlier today.
What is
Shaggy Boombastic on Billboard, 24th of June, 1995. We don't just throw this thing together, There's a lot of time and effort
quality
which goes in.
Programming
on
your radio.
We did mention, didn't we, about him having a hit also with In the Summertime.
In the Summertime, which I said I think is the greatest summertime song
really is.
ever. I love it.
Yeah, and lots of people confused on Mungo Jerry today. We like that.
Yeah, you
We
got
do
him
like
on that one. I thought you had me confused.
We like that.
Yeah.
Okay, right. So the Texas governor is our next story, signing the bill requiring the 10 Commandments to be displayed in classrooms. Is that going to fly, as they would say in the States?
No, it's not going to fly. It's not going to fly because it didn't fly in Louisiana. It's been tried in a couple of states, very, very conservative states. And I think the point that needs to be made is that if you want the 10 Commandments in your school, go to a religious school, go to a Christian school. You can have the 10 Commandments in your school all you want. But if you are a public school, if you are being funded by taxpayer money, I don't think it should be in there because people, especially in the States is really, it's a cliche, but is a melting pot. There are Muslims, there are Jews, there are Protestants, there are all sorts of Catholics and all sorts of people, and I think it's irresponsible to do that. I believe strongly in the separation of church and state, and as I said, this has already gone before the Supreme Court. Being tried in Louisiana, and it failed. So now Texas is going to try, and Texas is a lot larger state, and they probably, who knows, they may have better lawyers, but they're going to try it again, and they're going to keep on whipping that pony till it gallops a little bit, so to speak. So I don't really know, but I think it's a waste of money and time. But they're going to keep people who are like that are going to keep pushing the system. Yep.
Maybe they could come up with some values that display, or like human values.
Values, absolutely. Like, okay, number one, Mungo Jerry in the summertime.
But the best summer song ever.
song ever.
Really, you're taking this a bit too lightly.
Number two. No, never mind. We're not going down that road.
Okay, all right. Right, what about the cannabis story that you picked up on as well?
Don't read too much into that. I just thought it was a good story.
Okay, but I'm not surprised by this, that marijuana users are up to twice as likely to have a stroke, heart attack, or die from heart disease. Twice as much likely as what? As smokers or as non-cannabis users?
I guess non-cannabis users.
Right, okay.
I think that's what it'd be. 24 states in the U.S. have recreational marijuana, including the state I came from, Oregon, and it's very much just a very casual thing there. You'll see people smoking on the streets and in their homes and not being arrested. And a lot of it was done for the sake of decriminalization. Too many people were being locked up just for smoking pot. And the jails were just filled with people who just had a little bit of pot on them. And I'm not dismissing that as because it's something that is illegal, and I understand that. But now I'm not at all surprised that for people who are using, there are all sorts of problems, because at the end of the day, you are inhaling smoke. And so people are saying that you should treat marijuana
makes the
like
heart
tobacco.
Beat faster for a start, doesn't it? Raises blood pressure.
Well, anytime you inhale anything, it's whether it's vape or that, you're going to increase any sort of potential for lung problems.
Yeah,
just common sense would tell you that.
Many researchers believe that marijuana may make small defects in the coronary arteries lining the thin layer of cells that forms the inner surface of blood vessels and hollow organs. Don't need to tell you.
No.
What are you? I'm not saying that you.
You looked at me when you said hollow organs.
No, it's the fact because you were just telling me how much you swim for your heart.
I do.
So
I do quite a bit. And
so that's
you
why
and I are both swimmers. So
that's why
we
I
both
was
like to do
mentioning
that.
it.
I thought we were going down a different path.
It was the way that he says. You always think I'm having a go because
I
they
do.
say researchers believe. I thought they might have had enough knowledge by now and research to say categorically. But anyway,
now it's becoming a really big thing. I'm really surprised that outside of places like Amsterdam, it is not a bigger thing in Europe, and it's not recreational. But what are you going to do?
How big a thing is, after the 7-game series, Oklahoma City Thunder NBA champions? Finally, NBA
finally.
champions.
It took them about 2 weeks to play this series. It's 7 games. Frankly, I have no dog in this fight, as they say. I don't.
Your team wasn't in there.
My team wasn't in it. The Portland Trail Blazers have not been in the playoffs for a long time. And so but Oklahoma City was a superior team, but it was a very exciting series, I understand. But people who live here must know that we are 6 and 7 hours ahead of night games, and so most of us did not get a chance to see games. I saw a lot of highlights, and the games were really well played. So congratulations to the Oklahoma City Thunder, their first championship ever.
Second youngest team ever to win.
Very young team. Average age of, what did they say, 24, 25? Something like that. Really, so meaning they're probably going to be in the playoffs for quite a long time. But really good basketball from what I saw, and fun to watch. Every year it used to be the Lakers, the Celtics, the Rockets, et cetera, et cetera. But now 2 new teams are in there, and the NBA's big, and God bless them, and congratulations to Oak City.
We're going to wrap with Doobie Brothers from 1975 on Billboard, 24th of June. Here's something to take to bed with you. Probably actually a number of other things will happen before then, but Donald Trump shared screenshots on social media of a message he received from NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte, who lauded him for his decisive action in Iran. Congratulations and thank you for your decisive action in Iran. That was truly extraordinary and something no one else dared to do. It makes us all safer, Rutte wrote in his first message that Trump published.
Okay.
Of course, as we mentioned, on his way to the NATO summit in The Hague, thanks to the number of people that also did point out.
Thank you.
You asked to tell us where it was. The messages show Rutte also praised Trump for securing a landmark defense spending agreement among NATO allies. You're flying into another big success in The Hague this evening, he said. It was not easy, but we've got them all signed on to 5%, Rutte added, referring to Trump's push for NATO allies to increase defense spending. NATO preparing to announce that new commitment, requiring all member nations to spend at least 5% of their GDP on defense, a long-time demand of Trump, of course, which now seems closer than ever to becoming official policy, despite the Spanish and the Belgians, who aren't quite on board, it seems. But hey, looks like it's going to happen.
Mañana.
All righty. Well, thanks for today. Just lots of different things and different aspects of the story to pick through. Let's just hope that they were right. One and done.
See you next week at Monday.
Indeed.